what's up everybody? My name is Corey Baumeister, and today I'm going to be giving you a rundown of the Magic World Championship located in Las Vegas. I'm going to let you know who is playing in the event, what formats they're playing, what are the popular decks in those formats, how you could qualify for the event in 2023, and of course, where you can watch this event. So without any further ado, let's dive into the 32 players that we're going to be seeing competing at the World Championship this year. Starting it off, it's got to be the number one story, and that's, well, the champion from last year. That's Yuta Takahashi taking down World Championship number 27 last year after an 0-3 start. 0-3. I went 0-3 in a few tournaments, and believe it or not, I did not do well in any of them. So for Yuta to be able to pull back and accomplish what he did by winning, well, every single other round after that draft didn't go so well is really exciting. So we'll see if Yuta Takahashi can join the ranks of only Shahar Shenhar, who has went back-to-back at the World Championship. Now we're going to take a look at the Innistrad Championship and see the 6 players that qualified through that avenue. We got Yoaki Ike, Simon Gertzen, Riku Kumagai, Toru Sato, Zachary Keeney, and the champion Yuki Ichikawa taking this event down with that really innovative Golgari food deck in Historic, where Yuki Ichikawa's team dominated this event and really started this year's presence of the sheer dominance from the Japanese super team. Next up, we have the Neon Dynasty Championship, which brought a slew of amazing Magic players to be qualified for the World Championship. We have Yadai Miyano, Z Yimin, Zach Dunn, Johnny Gutman, John Emmanuel Duprat, and the champion of this event, a really good friend of mine, Eli Cassis, taking it down by venturing into the dungeon. Last but not least, we have the New Capenna Championship, which was the last opportunity for these players to qualify for the World Championship. So everything was heating up and everything was on the line for pretty much all of these players. So let's take a look at the top 6. We have Simon Nielsen, Mike Sigrist, Hisamishi Yoshigawa, David Inglis, Carl Serap, and our winner, Jan Merkel, who won a Pro Tour back when he was 17 and is back winning this event and has his eyes on the World Championship. Jan Merkel, one of the favorites of the event, full stop, makes it in here at the New Capenna Championship. Next up, we have the top league competitors. This was 5 players that accomplished not just spiking a tournament. These were 5 pro players that first had to get into one of the leagues, no easy feat, then had to constantly be doing well in these set championships and in league play against each other. So the top two very much favorites of the format, that's Shota Yasaoka and Reed Duke, who are household names. They have so many results between them. They have a combined 18 premier event top 8s, 46 Grand Prix top 8s, and 10 trophies. Come on. These 2 players are excellent at what they do, and they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. The next 3 players, no slouches at all whatsoever. Matty Kuzma, Jakob Toth, Logan Nettles round out the top league competitors who also just had phenomenal years. And oh yeah, Logan Nettles, Reed Duke, they're related. I guess magic runs in the blood there. Now that we've talked about the league players, the most elite of the players that have really been around the game forever, let's talk about some of the challenger players that are maybe really on the come up themselves, and the players that really had an outstanding year for someone who may have not been qualified for all these events. So these will be our final 8 players. We have Tristan Wild LaRue, Greg Orange, Yuma Kazumi, Nathan Stoyer, Julian Wellman, Jim Davis, Drew Baker, and Lucas Honey as our last 8 players. Some of these players might be a little unknown to you. Some of them are really strong players that have been around the game forever, like Greg Orange, the Citrus Assassin, who has been known to slow things down. Play some Teferi Control in his day, and wouldn't be too shocked to see that style of deck in his hand for the World Championship. We have Nathan Stoyer, who just won his second Mox event and has top 8'd I don't even know how many anymore. The number is outrageous. Nathan has been dominating Magic Online. He's only 20 years old, and I expect a lot of great things from him. I think he's truly the future of Magic, so it's going to be really exciting to see him at the biggest stage. We also have a player who has dominated the SCG circuit, has played on plenty of Pro Tours himself, Jim Davis, who did the historic thing that no other player has done in this whole year, and that was go 12-0 in one of these set championships to lock himself a spot at the World Championship. Oh, and he also had his first baby not too long ago, so congrats to you, Jim and Nicole. So that's the 32 players that are going to be competing at the World Championship. But who's going to be talking about the World Championship? We got a great broadcast team here with some of the best in the business, and yeah, I guess they even let me join this coverage team for this event as well. Can't wait to bring you coverage of this event. It's going to be a special time in Vegas. So now that we know all the players that are involved in this tournament and all the people casting it, let's see what these players are playing for. Wow. $500,000 prize pool is going to be awarded to these players, where a cool $100,000 will be given to the first place finisher, $50,000 for second, even top 8 gets you $20,000, and just for showing up, you get $7,500. Not a bad place to be to play in a Magic tournament. Now that we know how much money these players are playing for, we got to figure out exactly what they're playing. This is a 3-format World Championship, starting it off right in the morning with Dominaria United Booster Draft. This format is incredibly fun to play. My favorite archetype personally, I love me some Is It Spells style of decks where you play a bunch of lightning strikes, a bunch of impulses, a bunch of cheap 1-mana cantrips, and then you round out your deck with a bunch of Tolarian Horror, which is going to be a card that we're going to be seeing a lot of. You can see it in Dimir control decks, 3-color control decks. We're also going to see a lot of domain style decks where they're just going to be playing all the colors, trying to make sure the mana works, as well as different beatdown decks. You can be Orzhov, you can be Boros. Really, if you can think it up in this format, you can do it. The Dominaria United limited format is so wide open, and it really gives you a lot of room to deviate from the normal plans. And you know what? At a World Championship event like this, where the best in the world are going to be drafting, and are going to be drafting the best cards as well, because, well, they've been practicing a lot, some players are going to have to get quite creative. So I cannot wait for Marshall and Paul to be calling that first draft right in the morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So make sure to be there if you're a limited fan, because nobody wants to miss that draft. Now we're going to be talking about Standard. This is one of the 2 constructed formats that we're going to be playing, and it's the format that the players are going to have to be most prepared for, as Sunday, the elimination rounds are going to be Standard as well. So Standard is the format right now that I think has the most uniqueness and the most change to it, because not only did we just have a rotation where a bunch of sets left us, we also just had the ban of Meat Hook Massacre, the card that was just absolutely controlling all these aggressive decks. It just ended up being so difficult to amass a bunch of creatures, and your opponent just goes Meat Hook Massacre, gains some life back, and it just really kind of invalidated some of those strategies. So with Meat Hook Massacre being out of the metagame, we're really going to expect a lot of different decks. But outside of aggro decks having a little bit more chance, something that we are really going to see as far as decks at this World Championship are going to be the big 3 decks here that all really do contain the color black, and be like, wait a minute, Meat Hook Massacre just got banned. How are these black decks so strong still? Well, they're paired with a lot of extremely good colors right now. So I think the most popular 2 decks that we're going to see is Esper Midrange, which just really has some of the best Magic cards in the format. So the main thing that this deck is trying to do is cast Rafine Scheming Seer. This 1/4 flyer that is able to connive whenever any of your creatures attacks is proving that it's just one of the most dominant cards in the format. We're also going to see the Wandering Emperor in this deck, which is one of the best cards from Neon Dynasty, if not the best. Being able to play this card at instant speed and really mess up combat is what these Esper players are really signing up for when you choose this deck. So outside of that, you get to play a lot of the best black cards, and this is really going to give a good picture answer to why black is going to be the most dominant color in standard, almost for sure. If it doesn't end up being that way, you know, you can come at me in the comments, because I would be shocked, because the black cards are just so impressive. Not only do you have Shieldred the Apocalypse, which is the best black creature that is being played right now, you also have really strong cards like Tenacious Underdog, and then a little bit more what you would expect from traditional black decks, and that is Duress in the sideboard. Very good against a lot of different decks that have these really expensive haymaker spells that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But you get to play Infernal Grasp, Cut Down, you get to play Path of Peril, Soul Transfer. Really anything that deals with creatures or permanents is going to be the MO for these black decks. So we're going to be talking about those a lot, and we're really going to you know, be focusing on that, because it is one of the bigger things. White also gets access to Wedding Announcement. Wedding Announcement just really proving its worth in this new standard when paired with other things like Tenacious Underdog, like Rafine, where you're able to draw some cards if you want to, or add to the battlefield and then eventually have Wedding Announcement flip, where it is that glorious Anthem style of effect. Another card you're really going to be seeing from these white decks is AO the Dawn Sky. This card is really proving to demand exile removal from your opponent. Otherwise, this card is just going to get so much value. You can kill it, flash in a Wandering Emperor or something like that, and then you just traded one evil for another evil. Now let's talk about the deck that I expect as either the first or second most popular deck based on the tournaments that we've been seeing so far, and that's Jund midrange. This one is really just your traditional Jund deck. You're playing really powerful creatures like Tenacious Underdog, Blood Tithe Harvester, Briarbridge Tracker, Graveyard Trespasser, Shieldred, and then you're backing it up with some of the best removal. You're backing it up with different removal spells like Riveteer's Charm, you know, Infernal Grasp, Cut Down. Unleash the Inferno is another really special one that we're going to see. And this is kind of the reason to be playing Jund as far as the removal suite goes. Not only are you able to kill a creature or a planeswalker, but if you deal that excess damage, you can deal with different artifacts or enchantments, something like Wedding Announcement or Reckoner Bankbuster, which is pretty much in every single deck, either in the main deck or the sideboard. But one thing it also gets, and that's the most important card in Standard, that's Fable the Mirror Breaker. Fable the Mirror Breaker is the best card in Standard right now. It has proved its worth in older formats. We're going to be talking about it when we talk about Explorer a little bit later as well, but even making an impact in Modern. This card's just incredible at creating yourself a shaman right away. Chapter 2 being able to loot away a couple of cards, and then Chapter 3 in these decks and in Standard in general is game-changing. It truly is game-changing, especially when you pair it with Blood Tithe Harvester to copy that, and now you're copying a removal spell? Wild stuff. Jund I expect to be a very strong deck. Now we'll talk about some of the other decks that we're going to expect to see, and the decks that we expect to see is not always what we end up seeing when it comes to these small 32-person field tournaments like the World Championship. I would expect players to be bringing some kind of off-the-wall decks. I can never put Shota Yasuoka on any deck because he will always surprise us, and he'll always play a deck that basically no one else can win with but him, and it's perfect for the event, and we all think he's crazy for playing it, and then ends up winning the event every time. So that's going to be a lot of fun to see the innovation that we get. But as far as other decks that we're going to see other variations on Jund where we'll see Windgrace. You know, these Jund Windgrace lists have been popping up quite a bit in different challenges or different events that really have any weight to them whatsoever. Soul of Windgrace is really, you know, the only reason we call it this, and it's just a different style deck that's a little bit more focused on ramping. Other decks we're going to see is Grixis midrange. This kind of uses Corpse Appraiser and other vampire-like themes to be able to gain a long-term advantage against other midrange decks, which is really what Standard is all about. These mid-range decks are becoming extremely powerful and extremely popular. We've also been starting to see Mono Blue Delver. Yeah, you heard me right. Delver of Secrets is making its way into the Standard metagame where you're playing a lot of cheap blue cards. Tolarian Horror, Delver of Secrets, and also just some other really strong creatures like Huadi Jin, which really counts and gets pumped for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard. So these are just really spell-based decks that might see an impact at the World Championship. Some of the other decks we're going to be seeing in Standard that might make an appearance, but aren't necessarily the tier 1 cream of the crop right now. I would say Celestia Enchantment could surprise us because this was a deck that was really being held back by the Meathook Massacre. So something like this could definitely pop up at this World Championship field. We can see other 5-color decks that take advantage of Leyline Binding, which is one of the best cards in Standard right now, that hasn't really found a home, as it's a little difficult to get all these land types to make it cost, you know, cheap enough outside of these triomes and stuff, but that is a real cost. But the Kami War style 5-color deck has been popping up a bit that we might see a little bit as well. Now let's talk a little bit about Explorer. Explorer is crazy. There are so many decks that we have seen over the last few years of Magic's history. There's a lot of new decks that have popped up with new synergies from current sets and old style Magic from previously. That it's a really exciting format, and I think this is the format where I would expect one of these teams to bring a deck that kind of just breaks it. You know, something that just, they absolutely found a deck that beats all the big decks and, you know, get really rewarded because of that. So I think that is definitely something that we're going to see. But the big decks that players need to be aware of, and I think are at the top of all of the competitors' radar, number 1 is Greasefang. Greasefang is an Abzan style deck that is trying to discard Parhelion 2, this 8-mana vehicle, and then bring it back with Greasefang Okiba Boss to be able to then bring it into play, get these angels, crew it up immediately, attack for 13, and really, really, really put a lot of pressure on your opponent and finish the game, you know, as fast as possible. Get in a little bit other damage after that, or just attack with Greasefangs. It also plays Azeka's Chariots, and then plenty of ways to get these vehicles into the graveyard. This is an extremely fast deck that gets to play Thoughtseize, which is already going to be good. Thoughtseize is going to be one of the most important cards in Explorer, so keep an eye on that very powerful 1-mana sorcery. But this is going to be a deck that a lot of players are going to be prepared for, or they're going to lose to it badly. You know, it's a deck that has a lot of variance, where sometimes it looks absolutely amazing, sometimes you don't get your pieces and it doesn't look that good, but something that's going to be on every single Explorer player's radar. Next up we're going to be having is Rakdos Sacrifice decks. These are going to be pretty familiar to everyone as well that has been playing Arena in the last year and a half. It personally does one of my favorite things. You put Cauldron Familiar into the oven, then it goes out of the oven, then you put it back into the oven, then it goes to your graveyard, then it's back in the oven.
1 hour later.
Sorry, I think I got stuck in a loop. I get too excited when I talk about Cat Oven decks because, well, I like playing them. I don't like playing against them. It's always a tough deck to play against, but these Rakdos style decks are utilizing the best card in Standard that we were talking about, Fable the Mirror Breaker. That is, you know, a mirror breaker if you're playing against a Rakdos mirror. Crickets, crickets, crickets. I'll see myself out. But it's also just a phenomenal card. Ends up being really good at getting the Shaman, looting away other maybe Cauldron Familiars to put them into your graveyard, and then being able to copy Mayhem Devil, which is one of the best cards in these Rakdos decks. Now we might see some deviation here where some of these decks splash green for Corvald, kind of the Jund food style decks that we've seen in the past, but the core of these decks is a Rakdos deck that usually has Giganta as the companion, and it's going to be another very big player at being able to control the metagame here in Explorer. Some of the other decks we're going to see in Explorer are maybe not as popular, and it's kind of going to be the Wild Wild West from here, but some of the other things we're going to be seeing is Fires of Invention style decks, whether they be Enigmatic Incarnation decks, where you're able to sack Leyline's Binding and maybe get an Agent of Treachery into play. Or they could be these Luca-style decks, these Jeskai Luca decks that are trying to transmogrify either Titan of Industry or Agent of Treachery into play. And they both utilize the Yorion Companion, which, you know, is not around in every format, but it is still around in Explorer. So I would expect a lot of people to utilize Yorion and other style of decks like that. We also might see some blue-white control decks where you see Teferi, Hero of Dominaria style decks that are going to just try to say a bunch of nope, counter that, nope, counter that, Wrath, Teferi, win the game style of gameplay. Some of these are Yorion decks, some of them play Lotus Field, all that kind of thing, depending on how you want to approach it. Either way, these decks play out the same. Stop your opponent from doing something, then cast Teferi. Other decks we might see is hyper-aggressive decks, mainly featuring Collected Company. You know, these green-white style humans decks have been pretty strong in the history of Explorer. Might see that. We might see some mono-red aggro decks, some decks that are just trying to really kill you quickly. Outside of that, the format is really wide open, so I'm so excited to see what these 32 competitors bring to the table. Now you might be asking yourself, you know, Corey, this tournament looks really, really awesome, but how do I qualify for this? How do I play in this tournament next year? Well, I got a nice little diagram to help you out right now. Let's take a look at this pyramid here. It all starts at the very bottom where you can load up Arena, start honing your skills, get ready for these qualifier play-in events, or be on the top of the ladder at the end of each season to get yourself a spot into the qualifier weekend. So once you get into the qualifier weekend, what you have to do is play day one, which you need 7 wins before you hit 2 losses to make it into day 2. Once you get into day 2, everything kind of restarts, and you once again need 7 wins before you hit 2 losses. If you hit 7 wins on day 2, not only are you going to be qualified for the Arena Championship, but you're going to be qualified for that season's Pro Tour, which is a huge deal. 2 extremely awesome events that are going to be running 3 times a year each. 3 Pro Tours, 3 Arena Championships, giving you those opportunities to qualify for the World Championship next year. And they also have a ton of money up for grab. $200,000 prize pool for the Arena Championship and a ton of cash for the Pro Tours as well. And you can be like Sam Rolfe right here, who already booked his seat to the World Championship in 2023 by winning the inaugural Arena Championship. Now, I know you're antsy to get into the queues and qualify for the World Championship next year, but first, we have to give one of these 32 players the trophy and the title of the World Champion of Magic the Gathering. So, now that we learned about all this information about the World Championship, here's all the information on how to watch it. We will be in beautiful Las Vegas doing coverage of this event. It will be October 28th through the 30th, October 28th and 29th. That is going to be day 1 and day 2 of the events. We'll be starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time, so make sure to get there nice and early to watch that booster draft on the 28th and then Constructed Magic on the 29th. And on 10:30, that'll be the last day of competition. This will be our elimination round starting at 10:20 a.m. And that is where we will be crowning a champion and giving someone $100,000 US. We have Dominaria United Draft, Standard, and Explorer Constructed Magic. It is all going to be taking place at twitch.tv/magic, and make sure to use hashtag MTG Worlds so you can follow along with all the action as it happens in real time. And that's all the information you need to know about the World Championship here for Magic the Gathering. It's going to be an extraordinary event that I am so excited to witness firsthand. 32 great players that are going to be fighting it out for the title of World Champion and a nice check for $100,000. I know I'm going to be there. I hope to see you there as well.